I'm going to be looking at a game called Nomads No More. So this is a very unique game. I'm not aware of too much on this topic. I actually can't think of anything else on this topic, but this is in Paper Wars magazine number 986 from 2017. This game was designed, I believe, by John Gorkowski, and it's covering basically Mongolia conflicts in like 1920, 1921, right around the wrap up of the Russian Civil War. And this involves, well, it involves whites, reds, and Chinese, and then Mongolians are on both sides. So it's a very interesting game. Now, I played this and I wrote on it before it came out in Paper Wars. It was actually a free print and play game initially. And so I printed the components and crafted and made my own, map and pieces and whatnot, and played the game. And the replay that I'm going to present is going to be using these the print and play components, not the ones you get in here. In here you get a counter sheet, which this also has counters from another game, and then the maps. The map is fairly improved here. It's a 2-page, it's a little bit bigger. And then there's a second game that came with the print and play as well, and I did not play that one, and I don't think I printed it either, as a matter of fact. But this is what that map looks like, and some of those counters are in here as well. This is kind of an interesting game. This is a time period when a Baron Ungern, who was a white, it seems like he came from the German Austrian area. I can't really remember which, but he ended up fighting with the whites in this campaign, and I mean he made it his mission to conquer Mongolia for some reason. And then there's another leader in this game. I mean, there's no counter for him, but he's represented in this game. Casagrani, who I believe is an Italian, but he ended up fighting in World War I, and then he ended up being a very loyal person to the Baron here. And, they tried to conquer Mongolia. So in the end, it didn't work out for them, of course. But this game explores that, and I think it told kind of a great story. It's not a complicated game. I mean, it's like, I don't know, 6 pages of rules probably. But I'm going to go through the game and take a look at it. I'm going to go down to the map, and I believe this is going to take about 3 videos to cover the whole replay that I did on it. But it is interesting, and I have to apologize up front for the pronunciation. I mean, I'm already poor at my pronunciation of foreign words, but wow, once we start getting into Mongolia and Russia, I'm sure that I butcher all of them. So, your mileage may vary on that, but I'll do the best I can. Anyway, enjoy the replay, and we'll go down to the map. So we are starting here in September of 1920. And Baron Ungern Sternberg is leading an Asian cavalry force with some Japanese artillery support from their starting point in the Russian town of Aksha. So these units are moving toward Urga, which was a primary objective. So they are moving between the rivers of Onen and Karulin, and you'll know Ungern has the Cossack and Tatar cavalry in charge of this maneuver. And you can see they're just outside of Urga, which is defended by, it looks like about 4 regiments. Then the Reds are stuck in the north of the Mongolian border until June of 1921. So they're not doing so much there. They got to stay north of the border. And so the red player has the 35th Infantry Division deployed along the Trans-Siberian Railroad, and the 1st Regiment is in Irkutsk, and the 2nd Regiment is deployed in Chita, and the 3rd Regiment in Nerchinsk. And then what you see in the picture here is the railroad artillery, which is in Doria. And all of those locations are victory points, spots for Ungern's Whites. So these are going to be areas that have to be defended. The Chinese infantry units remain in Urga. This is an important defense point, and so they are awaiting an attack from the White Cavalry. You see that depicted here in the picture, and you've got a number of Chinese regiments deployed here, and I believe some artillery as well. There is no attrition at this point. The weather, it's September, so it's not extreme. And then we go on to the next turn, which is October of 1920. So Ungern's cavalry maneuvers into Urga, and battle erupts. And as you can see in the picture, I've got them separated off because battle actually takes place not in adjacent hexes, but within the hex. So I've kind of separated them out with this, this little graphic that I have on here. The odds in this battle, I believe, ferret out to 1-to-1, and the artillery on both sides cancel each other out. You've got Chinese artillery, you've got Japanese artillery, and each army ends up losing a step in casualties. It wasn't very decisive, so the attacker had to retreat, and that pretty much ends the White forces movement. But the attack triggers the reinforcement units from the Red, Chinese, and White, which are triggered by that first attack on Urga. This opens the door. This is like a triggering event. So these units are all placed on the turn record track, and that's for Red units, Chinese units, and White units. But that's what you're seeing in this picture, the White attack on Urga, that first attack, which basically was a stalemate. The Chinese forces remain deployed in Urga, but the Red troops are kind of stuck where they are still. They're in their different stations along the Trans-Siberian Railway, and so you see an infantry unit depicted here in Irkutsk. I believe that's the 135th Regiment along Lake Baikal. So that's pretty much all that happened in October. So we go on to November of 1920. It is now winter, which is starting. It's going to cause its own problems. So the White forces get a replacement point for Ungern, and he recruits men for the Tatar cavalry. The Chinese have no replacements. And meanwhile, what you see in the picture is the Russian Casagrande troops, which are led by Colonel Casagrande, end up moving into Kyiatka to Troitsk-Savsk. Yikes. Troitsk-Savsk. And then on to the Trans-Siberian Railroad, and that's what you see in this picture. And the Buryat cavalry formation also has linked up with Colonel Casagrande. And you see them in this picture. They've got red units on either side of them. Then in Mongolia, Ungern makes another raid on Urga. I don't have that depicted in the picture, but neither side is overly committed here. There are no losses, and the Whites end up having to retire again. The Reds are quiet, but they are anticipating an attack due to the White troop movement here on Verkhney Udinsk. And so to discourage that, what you see is the 335th, which has now moved in on the rear of the White troops along the rail from Chita to Verkhney Udinsk. And the 435th redeploys to Chita to defend that. That's not shown in the picture. So this is a winter turn, which means some of the units now are facing attrition depending on their circumstances. Now, these red units along the Trans-Siberian Railroad are not at risk. They're considered supplied, and this is their home area, so to speak. And the Chinese Mongolian detachment that is in Urga are also not affected because they control that capital. And but the white units, on the other hand, are all kind of hung out there, and they have to roll for attrition. Unfortunately for them, only the Cossacks with Ungern outside of Urga fails, which means they basically lose a step. And that brings November 1920 to a close. Now we go to December 1920. It is winter, and this is going to be another difficult turn. So Ungern's Cossacks recover a strength point due to replacements. So the Cossacks flip back to their full strength. And then Ungern leads another attack, of course, on the village of Urga, and that's what you see depicted in the picture. Again, though, this attack is repulsed, and the Tatar cavalry suffers a step loss, and they end up retreating yet again. So that's another attack repulsed at Urga. Then in Russia, Kazagrani's infantry and the Buryat cavalry attack the village, as shown in this next picture, of Verkhny Udinsk. And this attack is also turned back, and the white cavalry, the Buryat cavalry, suffers losses. So the whites end up having to fall back along the railroad lines. But you do see Verkhny Udinsk sees some fighting. Then the Russian 335th, which is coming up into the rear of the whites, decides to launch a counterattack into Kazagrandi's force right along the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And this ends up causing both sides to suffer casualties. And the Reds, though, are forced to retreat, and they do so along the Trans-Siberian Railroad. But the Reds did make a counterattack. None of the Reds suffer any attrition, even though it's winter, because they're along the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which is friendly to them. And the Chinese also fare well in Urga, but the winter continues to take a toll on the whites, and the Buryat cavalry all but evaporates. So that brings the December 1920 winter turn to a conclusion. Stay tuned if you'd like to see how this battle continues to play out. Have a great day.